Today we'll be shooting our second episode for Fireside Chats with blockchain gaming projects. So today we have Chase here. We're super excited to talk to Chase. We actually met with Chase a couple months ago. We talked a lot about philosophy of gamers as they're transitioning to the blockchain gaming space and different challenges associated with space. And so today we're going to go a little bit back and kind of like understand your story from the very beginning, how you got transitioned from traditional gaming into blockchain gaming space, what you've seen in space, learnings that you can share with the audience.
And I'm Peter. And you are?
And I'm Sasha. We're with Nira.
Cool.
All right. Well, I guess my turn. My name is Chase Freo. I am the CEO and co-founder of Alto.io. I've been in the games industry for about 9 years and running now, and I was previously CMO for a gaming and game publishing company in China called R2 Games. So during my time in the publishing business, one of the biggest problems and issues we've seen as far as game developers are concerned is that not all of them are able to strike a publishing deal, and not all game developers are able to fully realize the capacity of the development of the apps that they're making, of the games they're creating, because there's just not a lot of opportunities out there in terms of exposure, particularly if you are on publishing on the Google Play or the Android side of things, and very saturated. And we've seen like thousands and thousands of apps right now or games being published on these platforms day in and day out. And a big factor of what most games or why most games succeed in these platforms is because of marketing. And that's one of the driving forces to how we've thought about maybe we could democratize it a little bit and do something that has to do with the blockchain. Hence, Alto was created soon after that.
Cool. And you cut out for just a second. You said that the market was really, really saturated, and this is a desaturation play?
Yep, it's well, the mobile market has always been saturated. Right. And if you look into the disparity there, you're looking at about 1% of the gaming market or the game publishers or game developers being the big ones. You have like King, you have Supercell, you have EA, for example. These are the ones that gets about 94% at the very least of all the revenue in the App Store. And the remaining 6% is coming from the rest of the mid-scale to small-scale developers. And I think that's quite a hurdle for a lot of like indie game developers who just wanted to create naturally beautiful games and also make money at the same time. And in a way, the store somehow doesn't really facilitate that success, although they're trying to mitigate failed projects or games just because, not because their games are not good, but because the games in general are just really hard to be discovered.
Mm-hmm. And why specifically blockchain? I'm sure there's a lot of other solutions out there. Why Web3? Why blockchain?
So back in 2017, when CryptoKitties hit the market, I think it's the first time that as game developers and as publishers, or anyone who's really into frontier tech, it's the first time that we actually see like practical applications on NFT. And for us, it's really exciting having like sovereign assets that players could own and trade with each other. To some extent, like if you look at centralized games in general, it's not new. Like there's like Neopets and all that stuff where you can do like collectibles and stuff, right? But it's only now that these assets are actually sovereign and actually there's actual ownership attached into it. And on the blockchain side of things, if you attach a game that is, let's say, for example, meant for mobile or meant for PC or Steam or wherever that may be, right? It's one thing to succeed because of the game model that there is now, and a lot of them is just free to play in general. There's like a lot of gacha mechanics into it, loot boxes and stuff like that. But the thing with that is you need to be able to break through a lot of users for you to be able to succeed. in, let's say, for example, 1 million users for you to be able to get at least 1 to 2% of that paying into your game, which isn't the case in a blockchain economics kind of game, right? Where everybody's leading with their wallets and everyone who participates in, I don't know, like your pre-sale, for example, automatically is considered as a paying user, because everything that you sell within the game in itself that you're trying to build or that you're planning on building is going to be a non-fungible token that can be purchased by, you know, however you want to purchase it, Ethereum, whatever cryptocurrency it may be. I mean, the only question right now is like, how are all the regular gamers going to try to get involved into the crypto side of things when not a lot of them are really interested just yet? I mean, like, you know, like NFT space, it's a very small market at the moment. And so it's one thing to enable the technology and to facilitate people from joining into this kind of like revolution, so to speak, but it's another thing to scale it up, because that's sort of like the next few challenges that game developers or platform developers are.
What was that last sentence?
Oh, I mean, if I'm talking about scaling. So yeah, so as I was saying, like, you know, the biggest challenge right now is that the NFT space is small, and you're not really sure, you know, how it's gonna fare in the next couple of months or in the next couple of years.
Right.
So how do you optimize, you know, the processes involved in making sure that people from all walks of life get into the projects that are in, you know, in relation to blockchain and gaming in general, and be more involved.
And what do you think will it take to get those people involved?
Well, that's a loaded question. Just because there's plenty of entry points and there's plenty of issues that needs to be solved or it needs to be addressed. Some of them are not even issues, but maybe like lack of technology or some missing parts here and there. But if you approach this in a perspective of a game developer who just wants to create a great content, a great game, and also wants to incorporate blockchain at the same time into their game, it would probably take a couple of months and hours of really trying to get involved into it, because it's like to pivot your mindset from creating and building a game that's centralized to creating and building a game that's decentralized. These are two different things, right? And if people are having a hard time onboarding users into their games, it's going to be much more difficult for people to onboard these users that doesn't have an idea what crypto is, that doesn't have an idea how to use a wallet, or doesn't have an idea how to work with MetaMask, for example, or to get their first Ether, for example. Then it could be very hard for everybody on the NFT space to get into the mainstream. And so I think what people are doing now is the primary market of people building NFT-based games at the moment are those that are already in crypto, like communities that are already heavily involved in non-fungible tokens, communities that are heavily involved in buying or selling cryptocurrency in general, because they are the ones who kind of fully understand already how the whole ecosystem works. So generally you have three types of market that you want to bring in. The first one would be those that know crypto and also knows games at the same time and understand that it can be applied on blockchain. The second one would be the non-gamers, but understands the blockchain and holds crypto. And the last one would be neither of those. Those that are, your regular Candy Crush players, or your typical mobile games player or PC player who's not involved in neither crypto or blockchain games. And that's like the bigger piece of the pie that we bring in. But it takes time for us to be able to do that.
Yep. And I remember last time when we talked, we were talking about balance between the gameplay, compelling stories, and also this new economics piece to it, right? So how do you think about that? Because we haven't to date seen that many games that are like super compelling yet. They can introduce this new concept, but they're not fun intrinsically.
Yeah. I mean, and that's where it all comes in, right? I think it's a natural progression because at the moment, the game developers that are building on the blockchain are very pragmatic in the sense that they do understand that the primary market for the games that they're building that involves NFTs are those that are already in the community. So there's a massive kind of a concentration of efforts that are geared towards the existing NFT and blockchain and gaming and crypto community, and not so much on being on the outside going into the space in general. And that's the reason why at this point a lot of games are still being built in that mindset. And I think that it is going to be a gradual progression. It's not like something that, okay, today I'm going to build an MMO that targets those non-crypto users. And the reason for that is, not a lot of people are willing to take that risk just yet because the market is not very mature. And so there's still plenty of optimizations and plenty of things and tech that needs to be on board for it to realize its potential. And it will come in hopefully this year, next year even. And that's one of the reasons why we're not yet seeing these games. But, make no mistake about it. There's a lot of people that are already thinking far ahead on how they can go ahead and be part of the solution. How do we bring in the masses into, blockchain and gaming? And I think that it's not about why are they not doing it, but it's more about when are they going to do it. And I think that when the market is ready for it, this will all snowball into one pile of great games coming out from one after another.
Do you have an idea of what that critical mass looks like? What the tipping point is? Do you envision something?
I was asked this question a year ago, and I was proven wrong. Saying that I think the tipping point is happening really soon, right? And I think that one of the when people in crypto and people in general outside of our community reaches to a point of no return, that's where things are going to sort of move over onto our favor. Right now, the tipping point is not anywhere near, I think. I mean, some people will disagree with me, but it is too early, and I think it's early in such a way. But strides are being made to actually facilitate a point where that tipping point of massive amount of gamers that are not even in crypto and blockchain are going to start becoming interested into the things that we're doing right now. It's probably going to happen. For example, Facebook right now is making this massive attempt with Libra to get into the blockchain in the crypto space, right? And I think that one huge project that matters to a lot of people, even to non-gamers, right? Whether that's an IP or whether that's a big MMO, massively funded MMO project that sort of captures the imagination of gamers even from outside our space, that could be a potential beginning of people sort of looking into blockchain and gaming as something that is going to change how they play games and how they interact with the games that they want to play. So right now, on my radar, nothing just yet, but it's going to happen sooner than later.
And do you think so this is a loaded question, but do you think that the first users are developers or alternative users? What do you imagine that cascade looks like? How important are developers?
developers are very important. I think, and you're right, at the very least, like those that started out NFT, that started in the NFT space, those that started experimenting on playing crypto games in general, are mostly really just interested in this space. A lot of them are game developers at the very least as well. Those that are willing to move over from mobile and onto blockchain and crypto. And that is going to be the case as well over the next few months. Like more and more game developers will be more than interested to build on the blockchain. And I think like even in Alpha, for example, which is what we're trying to facilitate, my co-founder and chairman of the company, Gabby, is also the CEO of our sister company, Altitude Games, where we recently released Battle Racers. We just closed our pre-sale yesterday, great success, but they started dabbling into creating non-NFT games or NFT-based games a couple of months ago, likely, not months ago, a year ago, like end of 2017. And, you know, like in a way they realized that it's kind of like really hard to sort of like pivot your mindset and transitioning into what you already know right now and moving over into like a distributed ledger technology or a blockchain technology. And so they were like, okay, because like they're more known for building great games and content, right? And that's where we sort of like, okay, maybe we can facilitate that. For example, that just basically abstracts all those away from them and let them focus on building the games, and let us take care of the smart contracts, let us take care of the back end stuff that needs to be done for them to be able to create that. And in a way, I think that's also what's going to happen at some point when all these game developers starts to create content that has blockchain in it, and all their players and all their community would start becoming interested in how it's done. But like the approach, a lot of people are experimenting different approaches as to how to onboard non-blockchain, non-crypto people into the space. And I don't think any approach is wrong, because it's basically just having people over, just in different different entrances, and whichever becomes the most effective one, I think, will become like the model of which every other games on the blockchain will try to emulate as well.
And maybe can you elaborate a little bit on Battle Racers? How long did it take to go from the concept to actually release? What was the most challenging aspects of this? What kind of blockchain did you work with? Some of the learnings.
So Battle Racers, this is something that Gabby can elaborate on further at some point in the future when we start talking to him as well. But Battle Racers, we did this for a couple of months. We started doing the research. Gaming team, which is Altitude, they're involved in building all of the amazing gameplay that is going to be involved in Battle Racers at some point in the future over the next couple of weeks, I believe. And then there's the Alto team, who was building the platform in parallel to building the pre-sale for their items in that course of the last 6 months or so. And we built on Ethereum just because most of the projects right now are on Ethereum anyway. Obviously, if you'd ask me, is it going to be Ethereum forever? I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not, right? But we built it on Ethereum, and it took us about, I'd say, half a year to really nail down the details of like how the game and the pre-sale would look like. And then we released back in May 15th, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, May 21st. Like we moved it a week after. So May 21st. And then soon after we released, a couple of hours later, we reached about $120,000 in sale for the carts. It's not for the crates, sorry. So the way it's made is that we sell different types of crates, like 4 different types, and each crate would have different loot drops. And so battle rate of like ever heard of like a Tamiya? It's like different car parts that you build. And so yeah, so like it's like a Hot Wheels / Tamiya arcade racing on the blockchain, where you mix and match different car parts and build a car with different stats and properties attached into it. So there are 4 different types of car parts, and it's all in these different kinds of crates that you buy. You unlock them, it's like a loot box, and you mix and match all of these car parts. Eventually, you can trade those car parts that you don't want, and then maybe sell some of them and buy some of them to build your ultimate car, and you can race them on Decentraland.
Interesting.
Cool. And how have gamers responded to, performance? Well, maybe a quick detour, and if you don't know like this off the top of your head, no problem. But is that what percentage roughly is on-chain versus off-chain for that game?
A big part of the game in itself is off-chain. I mean, at this point, it's really hard to find pure on-chain experience, just because of like the setbacks and the limitations of the technology. So most of the game logic happens off-chain, and we use the blockchain to sync like the details of like what happens off-chain and ownership and or establishing finality of the assets. Those happens on-chain, but everything else happens off-chain. So essentially the chain just works as a function, as an authoritative ledger of what basically happens off-chain. And obviously like the experience of whether a game developer should choose to do most of their game logic on-chain or off-chain would really depend on, number one, the technology and how it fits the type of game or the genre of game that they're making. I mean, I don't have any kind of game on the top of my head right now, but let's say, for example, a game that would certainly benefit on something that is on chain would be something that requires like a moment-to-moment interaction, where you want to see the sequence of steps of what can happen. Like for example, like a contest. Like if there's a duel, for example, where you have to shoot each other. That certainly has to be on chain, because let's say, for example, you and Sasha would duel. There's a prize money involved. Usually on chain, at the moment, it might take some time before you confirm who wins. Did I win? Did Sasha win? And then where will the money go to? Will a smart contract direct it to Sasha or to myself, right? So these things can or has to be on chain instead of off chain, but the off chain just because it's just it's better that way on the user experience side of things.
And the follow up to that was how are gamers responding to the performance? Do you have data on that? Do you get any feedback on that?
Not yet, though. Not yet, primarily because the beta of the racetrack itself has just been released.
Right.
So it would likely be in the next couple of weeks or a month from now, once we finally get some well-established data on like how users respond to it. But at the top of my head, like at the very least, like on a more centralized environment with publishing, for example, like most players really are just more concerned about user experience. Mm-hmm. That's the primary thing that players would look for in a game, is that what's the experience like? Because the moment that you make them jump through multiple hoops just to play a game, you'd lose a lot of players. There's a lot of attrition happening. And that's why free-to-play games on mobile, for example, has a lot of like really optimized way of getting a person to onboard, from installing the game to playing the game because they want to lessen the attrition and increase the longevity of the players playing their games. It's just really all about user experience.
Mm-hmm. And since you're also pretty well connected, in a traditional gaming space, you probably constantly have conversations with people about blockchain over there. Do you see any change in sentiment over time, or?
Yeah, well, that's a good question though, because over the course of like being in publishing and in mobile games, I've met a lot of people, and some of them are the people that I help get published, or some of them are the people that approach me at some point to get their games published, right? And a huge sentiment on that one is a lot of them last year when I attend conferences that are mostly about mobile and gaming and not blockchain, their sentiment is, why do we need it, right? Why do we need the blockchain when we're perfectly fine and mobile? And I think that's true in the sense that it really depends on who you talk to. If you talk to developers that have well-established titles and are sitting comfortably with a good runway, for example, sitting comfortably with good games that are being noticed on the Google Play Store or like being downloaded, really great business model on the game itself, they probably would look away from it or at least like not really entertain it until things are on a tipping point. But those indie game developers that I've spoken to, those mid-scale to small-scale developers that I've talked to, different types of business models to explore different types of ways as to how they can create games. And I think that the reception just really would be different this year than it was last year, because this year there's more clarity in terms of like the infrastructure and like how you can migrate games from mobile or PC or a traditional game onto the blockchain, or how you can at least create a hybrid, for example. One of the games that we work with, the first game that we work with our platform is called Crystal Cart. It's from a Swedish game developer. It's a really perfect partner to work with because they're amazing in terms of building content and games, right? But they don't have enough manpower for them to be able to really sit down, look at the centralization, look at the blockchain, look at smart contracts and solidity, and attach non-fungible tokens in their games. So that's where we came in. We helped them out, and the result is a hybrid game of centralized assets, but also assets that are non-fungible tokens that can be played in their racetracks. And the game is both available on iOS and Android.
Cool. And kind of turning a corner a little bit, I'm really curious, probably along the way you've ran into some hiccups. What was the biggest mistake you've made, and what did you learn from it?
There's plenty. Maybe too long for our conversation today, but I guess like a lot of mistakes just really happen on especially for frontier tech like this, right? Mm-hmm. A big chunk of that is choosing standards that you want to work with, because at some point you also want to future-proof your technology, for example, or the product that you're building. On the Alto side of things, on the platform side of things, this is a work in progress. And I think that we've made a lot of like tweaks and changes onto the platform, which causes a lot of delays in terms of like, when do we release it? When does it get available in beta for game developers, for example? And a big chunk of that is last year, all the standards that we've tried to include within the platform in itself, if you come to think of it fast forward this year, a lot of them are somewhat already outdated, and like there's a lot of moving pieces involved, right? Like the blockchain tech is also changing at the same time you are building along with the changes. And some of the areas we were not fast enough to adapt to the change. And so that sort of like creates this small hiccups in terms of like, all right, then we have to extend our delivery date, and then we just have to adjust what's on the platform itself. On the game side of things, it's pretty much similar. I think that when you are working with a lot of moving pieces, a lot of technology that's just not involving yours, you would find a lot of hiccups right here and there. And I think that the more you work with multiple technology into your, it could sort of like cause a lot of delays, especially if one of the moving parts isn't working properly, or that you have to really like take care of it in such a way. So I think that's so like one of the learning experience that we've had is that don't overdo it in terms of things that we want to use for building a game or building a platform, and at the same time just really adapt fast, because these moving parts are also changing so much that whatever it is that you've built last year is likely not going to be as great as it is, because newer standards arises, and a lot of them are like, it just really makes sense, and that's the reason why you have to be on your toes all the time.
Mm-hmm. And also, we recently had a panel in New York with a couple gaming companies, so we heard some interesting approaches, like for example, like Neon District, they're playing around with idea of, like virality, kind of like giving gifts, which are of value, and that becomes this emotional moment. And so people actually, they believe that the people will start sharing those things a lot. Or, for example, how we talked last time about concepts like earn to play, that's Axie Infinity is playing around with. What kinds of things do you see in that are kind of like novel, potentially interesting, that might become really big new concept going forward?
So I think a lot of game developers are as to how they are going to build their game, right? Right now a lot of players playing non-fungible token games or blockchain games in general have a sense, there's all of these trading mechanics where a lot of people earn somehow. If you play Axie Infinity, for example, Gabby is a huge Axie Infinity player, and I'm sure like he earned a substantial amount of ETH already buying and selling and flipping some of his Axies. And I think that's a really novel idea in terms of like games that are fun to play, but also makes you earn money. One thing that I see as well is in terms of like user onboarding, which I think a lot of games will eventually use. And this, I think, Neon District is also one of the leading games that are trying to do this, is to really abstract away the experience of the blockchain so that games or players are able to digest the game without necessarily being overwhelmed with all the stuff that they need to do on the blockchain, right? And so I think one of the plan there would be, as a game developer, how do you bring over users without them having to set up a wallet right away? And you did mention something about attachment to and virality and attachment, right? And the way that some people that I know are doing is they're building a game that does not in the beginning, but it's much easier for you as a game developer to incentivize them to do things once they're already in your game. So it starts with a really great user experience, whether it's like a collectible game where you can collect different types of animals or whatever that is. And then eventually when you reach a certain level within the game, you throw in the option for them, hey, do you guys want to move on to the main chain, or do you want to have the option of having these items that you've collected or amassed over the last couple of months that you're playing the game and put them on the blockchain? And if they say yes, great. Show them how to mint the items. There's tutorials that would happen, but it's going to be a massive amount of education. But they're already interested in your game. They're already playing your game. So it's much easier for you to convert them over into somebody who would actually want to do that. And I think a lot of games should somewhat model that in such a way so that they can arguably not only get the crypto gamers, and the crypto holders, but also those that are not into crypto at all, and convert that into a player within their game that is only not working on the centralized aspects of their games, but also on the blockchain aspects of their games. And I think that's one of the models that most game developers are looking into it right now.
Cool. So we're almost out of time. So first I wanted to say thanks for coming.
No problem.
And my last question that I like to ask at the end of these to everybody who comes through here is, do you have any advice for somebody starting a blockchain company today?
I think one of the biggest advice that I could give to anyone who wants to start a blockchain and gaming company today, I'd say, would be to, so my biggest advice would be to start lean, because a lot, the market in such a way is there waiting to happen, but it is also very important for you guys to be able to actually understand the thesis of what you are building, also understand why you are building it, and understand exactly for whom are you building the project that you are working on for. Because if not, it's easy to get sidetracked with how the whole environment of blockchain and gaming is in terms of like what projects you can take on. It can easily get overwhelming, and in a way where if you don't have that focus, chasing rabbits all the time, with different parts of the projects going from one end to another. And I think it's important that if you have a vision of what you wanted to do, stick to that, while at the same time doing a little bit of R&D here and there on what things can be better. That's my advice, because I think I should have said that to myself as well a couple of months ago, because during the period that there's not a lot of things built, like I've spoken to a lot of people and I was like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And you kind of have to center yourself if you really wanted to be able to be impactful on something. That's, I think, one of the biggest piece of advice, because this is uncharted territory, and there's just plenty of things to build. And if you are one of those people who likes to build stuff, I mean, you are going to be in paradise.
Cool. So, in 2 words, maybe stay lean, stay focused.
Stay lean and stay focused. Yes, that's correct. I mean, something that I have to work on as well. I mean, I could have said it, stay lean, stay focused, and I said all of these things. But yeah, thank you for summing it up for me.
That's what I'm here for.
All right, well, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Okay, you too.